meeting to order. This is meeting number 3 for fiscal year 23 of the Advisory Finance Committee. Today is August 29th, 2022. This meeting is being recorded, and as soon as possible after this meeting is concluded, a copy will be posted on the Westborough TV YouTube site. Before we get into our main agenda, may I have an approval of the minutes of August 15th?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? 6-0. Thank you. This is the period of public comment. Since there are no members of the public present, we'll proceed on with the presentation from the Town Seal Committee. Our guests this evening are Nicholas Argento, Chairman of the Town Seal Committee, and Alla Baranovsky, Co-Chair.
Good evening. Thank you very much, everybody, for having us. We're going to do just a brief overview of how the committee came together, what we did for research, and what recommendations that we have. And then we'll be happy to field your questions. So the committee was formed through an act of the town meeting in May of 2021. And at the time, John Arnold, the town moderator, became the appointing authority. Once that was formed, we first met just about a year ago, and there are 9 of us on the committee. All of us are residents of the community. We all interviewed with John and applied and were appointed. One of our members, Jordan Hyde, joined the committee in December of 2021 after one of the initial members did not come to any of the meetings. We had this particular charge created by the town meeting, and that was for us to review the history of town seals in Westborough and of town seals in Westborough, and to consider whether or not the town should adopt a new town seal after a public process that would include consultation with a diverse group of stakeholders, holding multiple public forums, and then to provide a report and a recommendation to a future town meeting. And that recommendation was whether or not the town should adopt a new town seal, and then if we were to adopt a new town seal, to include also a process for us to be able to go about recommending to the town meeting how to do that, to create a new town seal.
Thank you, Nick. Our process of getting information from the community involved many steps. You can see them all listed on the right-hand side of the slide. They're a little bit out of order with what I'm going to say to you, but I'm sure it will not be difficult to keep up. We started by consulting with, we started by inviting a few folks for presentations that we heard as the committee. Dr. Anthony Baber presented his research on Eli Whitney and the cotton gin, and Wendy Mickle, who is also on the committee and who, as you know, probably is the town clerk, presented her research on town seals across Massachusetts as well. We met a total of 18 times in this year, from last August until this summer, and every meeting was a public meeting or a meeting open to the public. So, folks could attend. Only 1 or 2 sessions were actually attended by people from Westborough. But we also accepted emails from residents of Westborough, which we would then read during the sessions out loud. We also held 3 information gathering sessions that were open to the public separately from our meetings. These were held, 2 of them were last year in November and December, and 1 in February of this year, of 2022. So throughout this whole process, we were guided by 3 questions that we settled on as a committee. These 3 questions are listed on the left-hand side. These questions were also presented to the public in Westborough via a survey that we distributed between early 2022 and the end of March of 2022. So I'm actually going to hold off on the results of this unless this is the next slide. No, this is you.
So just a couple of pieces of background. So the brief history. In 1899, by an act of the state legislature of Massachusetts, all communities in Massachusetts were required to have a town seal. So Westborough first chose the town seal that you see on the left in 1913. And then in 1967, to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the founding of the community, the image that you see on the right was created, and it first appeared on a commemorative booklet. Then, in 1975, it also appears first on an annual town report. And then finally in 1977, by an act of Article 41 from the town meeting, an image similar to this, I'm going to show you another one in a moment, became the official town seal. And that official town seal, for our purposes, just to keep things clear, we're going to refer to the image on the left as the 1913 town seal. And then the better one is this one here. This is the current actual town seal of the town. We'll refer to this as the 1977 town seal. And you can see there are 6 distinct features of the 1977 town seal. As you see on the top, on the left-hand side, the claim of the 100th town adopted by the Commonwealth in 1717, an outline of the community, and then an image of the cotton gin. And then on, as you can see on the right, an image of the town hall, and then the pie crust border surrounding it in yellow, and then the incorporation date that was in 1717. And Al is going to just talk briefly about the analysis and the survey that we did.
So while analyzing responses from the community, we were careful not to double count the responses. Several individuals submitted their responses in multiple ways, such as appearing at meetings and then sending emails, multiple emails sometimes, also responding to the survey. The survey also sometimes had multiple responses from the same individuals. So we were very careful not to double count those. And the prevailing sentiment expressed across all of the responses that we received, which we tabulated all of them in a database. Of those, we have 413 unique responses. These are collected across multiple modalities. Was that the majority of residents the majority of residents who responded to our solicitations of feedback desired to change the town seal. That's 59%. Most of these responses, I should say, were unequivocal. There was no difficulty in coding these responses, whether they were for changing the seal or against changing the seal. A few of them were a little more ambiguous. And then in the case of those responses, we just took care as a committee to discuss the responses individually and code them in agreement.
Additionally, there are examples of some of the responses found on pages 2 through 4 of the report. So for those watching at home, there is a report that the Town Seal Review Committee will post on the town website, and then it will also be available at the town meeting. So this committee has details of that information also in front of you. So we have some samples that we had digested and agreed to put in as a committee. One of the things we considered was the cost. And the committee discussed the cost of replacing the 1977 town seal at 3 separate meetings. Since the Westborough Town Clerk's office is in possession of a fully functioning 1913, the original town seal, embosser, we feel that it's the least costly way to replace the 1977 town seal. We also think it returns to our heritage, and we also think it can serve to unify the town. The committee voted unanimously with all members present to replace the 1977 town seal with the 1913 town seal. Furthermore, any current use of the 1977 town seal may be replaced when a vehicle, a uniform, stationery, etc., is no longer in use. Now, we acknowledge that this will be a slow process, but we were also trying to be cognizant of how much money this would cost to do this. And we thought that this was the best way to go, so that the town can replace and if in the event a manager of one of the departments wants to replace it sooner, they can do so if funding is available. But one of the things that drove us was also how much is this going to cost the community.
This brings us to the recommendations in plural of the Town Seal Review Committee. The committee recommends that the official seal of the town of Westborough be changed from its current format to the one that was approved by the town in 1913. If this is not approved, we recommend that the town meeting authorizes the formation of a town seal design committee for the purpose of overseeing the design of a new town seal. We discussed a little bit the process by which this should happen, and we imagined something similar to the process whereby our own committee came together, that this would be a diverse committee appointed by the town moderator with the same considerations that he had in mind while appointing us. This committee would be charged with issuing a professional request for proposal to create a design for the new town seal. Also, it would be charged with determining a funding source and other duties as required to bring a new town seal to the town meeting for approval.
And we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. And thank you for your careful attention. We do appreciate that.
Thank you for your efficient presentation.
We tried. We tried.
And thank you for the advance information.
Would you like us to sit down? Would that be
If you
better?
like, yeah.
Okay,
Please.
all right. Is there any, would anybody like to see see a particular slide again? Because I know we went through it. No? Okay.
So the floor is open for questions.
Do you have a sense of how long it would take if there was a change in the seal for the replacement to happen? I know you acknowledged it would be a long time, but
Yeah.
do you have a sense of how long that might be?
Sure. Again, one of the things we were trying to be careful about was how much money it would cost.
Mm-hmm.
So it would just very much depend on where it is currently in place. So for example, let's say it's on the side of a fire truck. When is a fire truck replaced? Number one. But number two, the seal could be changed immediately if the funding was available, if the chief and obviously through the finance committee and the town meeting decided to allocate monies for it. So our thinking was it would be slow. Eventually it would fade away. We were very driven very much by two things. One, we thought that returning to the 1913 town seal was the best way to go. And then secondly, we're also trying to be cost conscious because of other demands that come upon the budget.
Yes, thank you very much for coming. I read your report. I think it's very well written, frankly. You guys, whoever, or your committee as a whole, did a very nice job. It's thorough. I like the way the footnotes are. I was very impressed by the report as a whole, and it had a lot of good information. One thing I wasn't sure whether it talked to, which I think I learned from seeing some of your meetings, was is it accurate to say the only official use of the town seal is the stamp, and almost all the other uses, maybe on stationery too, I don't know, are really optional in terms of it isn't required to have a town seal on a fire truck. It isn't required to have it on a uniform or something.
That's correct.
And that's
That is correct, yes. So that's, you're taking me back in my memory to Wendy Nichols' presentation. I don't want to give you incorrect information, but correct me if I'm wrong, Nick. My understanding is that exactly correct, is that the letterhead and the embosser, the actual seal, are the only official required uses of the seal. The others are more unofficial and sort of serve as a logo for the town.
So in fact, that supports the point of no immediate requirement to make a change because it's still a logo or something, right?
Right.
Okay.
That's right.
That makes sense. Do we have any idea, because we haven't owned the old stamp, but if we didn't own that, are we talking about saving thousands of dollars here, $25? I mean, I don't know what's a stamper thing sort of cost, ballpark?
Yeah, an embosser costs around $450,
Okay.
Roughly, and depends on where you go to get it done and where you put it out to bid. But Wendy had told us it was between $400 and $450.
Pre-COVID. So it's $900 now, right?
I didn't ask you how long it took
Metal's
to get it.
precious.
Under $1,000.
under a grand.
And then, I mean, stationery will eventually be
Yeah.
consumed, so
I
the
assume-
replacement of that is
I would
minimal.
assume they mostly print their things and not actually buy stationery, but maybe that's false. Okay, so one other question now. So it's likely if the town meeting decides to go for Plan B, which is hire a design firm to do this, that cost is greatly going to exceed the cost of the new embosser. So the embosser really isn't as much of the cost driver as if you want to hire a professional to do this or
Right.
whatever costs are in designs and selecting a person doing all that, that's probably bigger.
So possibly, we
Yeah.
discussed that briefly. Partially, we didn't give it as much attention as we did to the other charges because this wasn't part of the charge.
Yeah.
And we had exactly one person on the team who is a designer professionally, who was able to share some experience, but he was entirely unsure about, what the cost would be. We imagine it would vary greatly by firm. We also allowed for the possibility that someone might be able to do that pro bono. If there is a movement across Massachusetts to change town seals for other towns as well, then that might be something in the zeitgeist, and a design company might want to make a name for themselves by doing so. This, we decided, was for the next committee to figure out if they choose to do that.
Okay. Awesome, thank you.
Melanie?
So, I was trying to figure out how many places we have the town seal. So DPW probably has it on there, fire, police, town hall. I believe in front of the police station, there's something inset in the concrete, our town seal, as well as in front of City Hall, correct?
The town hall.
Right?
I am not aware of in front of the town
I'm
hall.
not sure that
So
there's.
just in front of the police station is that kind of brass embossed
Brass.
seal? Okay, so did you look into the cost of replacing that?
No.
So this falls under replacing as those items wear out, right? So the way
Well,
that
it's
exactly,
It's
right.
like for site purposes, I don't think it's something that would wear out.
Right,
So-
well, potentially there might be an update to the rock that sits in front of something at some point, right? Nothing lasts forever. So because these are not official uses of the town seal, we did not feel that this would be necessary to change as soon as possible. As these items wear out, then they might be replaced, or as these items are up for renewal or change of a design or whatever, they might be replaced.
So we recognize, Melanie, and we said this in the report, we know that this would be a slow process. But there, I had said this at a meeting that Shelby Marshall had talked about at one point about in regards to another controversy in the community. The community wasn't there, and that there was too much divisiveness in the community. So our focus became very centered on what could unify the community as opposed to trying to separate it out. And one of the reasons we decided to return to the 1913 town seal is that it speaks to the heritage of the community. We also, I think it's probably the third time saying this, we were very cognizant about how much this would cost.
Right.
So, and to speak to to repeat what Alice said, a brass plate in front of the police station will eventually wear out. It will need to be replaced. And certainly if there was a decision it could be made to replace it sooner. But we thought that that everything will eventually need to be replaced. And that's when and then it would have to be replaced at that point.
So go ahead.
Well,
Melanie.
well,
So in other words, I don't want to get stuck. I appreciate what you're saying,
Right. Or maybe
but we
not.
were trying to think more globally about the community and how to
But
get
you
there.
didn't have that many respondents for it to be a global recognition of the community's feel. I mean, you have to admit, for a town of 20,000, for so few people to respond, probably tells you that 98% of the town is not staying awake at night about this, right?
Well, so speaking as a professional statistician, I agree with you that it's not a huge sample. However, this is a sample, this is what we would call a voluntary sample, right? These are people who feel strongly about what the town seal should be. We made an effort for 12 months to involve folks in every way possible. For 12 months, we were open for comments, solicited emails, solicited survey responses, and we took great care to get these responses from various groups in town. So we didn't just speak to, let's say, one demographic group who tends to attend town meetings. We took care to distribute the survey through stakeholder groups in Westborough, for example. So we reached out to groups like Westborough Connects and the Rotary Club. We reached out to schools and distributed the survey in the schools as well. We wanted to cover as many of the different groups in town as possible. Even though it's not a huge sample, that is not required for it to be representative. We took great care for it to be representative. We may have succeeded or failed. There's not going to be a way to tell. But I think given the general popularity of local politics in people's lives, I think that this is a pretty decent sample.
We also had a robust discussion about, when we were having the 3 public hearings, we had a robust discussion about whether we would read aloud, for example, responses from people who emailed comments to us, who are residents.
Okay.
And the premise was that some members of the community would find it difficult to try to come to the meetings no matter when we were holding them. We held one intentionally at the Senior Center on a Saturday in February. And it happened to be one of the most beautiful Saturdays in the winter, and a very sunny Saturday. We had about 20 people there. I think that we were really mindful about trying to reach out to many different groups in the community. Now, if somebody doesn't respond to it, they don't respond to it. But to speak to what Alice said, as you know, there are a certain number of people in the community who will be active and who will respond to any kind of an issue that you bring up in the community. So we were actually pleasantly surprised with the responses that we got. Would we have liked more? Yeah, sure, of course. I think you can always tear apart any set of responses, but the depth of the responses and the quality of the responses, I would argue is statistically representative of the community.
Okay. And you can tell from my accent, I'm from Mississippi. Born in Mississippi, raised in Alabama. I don't understand this kind of derogation of Eli Whitney when he did something that was monumental. And I know everybody wants to point to, and it's not with accuracy in your report, with regard to it increasing slavery. That is not an accurate statement.
Well, I'm sorry, finish.
That's okay. But, so I don't understand why there's this big drive when there's so many other things pressing in this community that we would focus on something kind of benign as the seal. It doesn't seem like that's where our focus should be right now.
I think the word benign is subjective. I also think, as a committee that I'm a mother of 2 black boys for whom it's not benign, and it's not benign to me, and I know lots of people in the community for whom it's also not as benign as it may be to you, a white woman from Mississippi. At the same time, on the Town Seal Review Committee, we had professional historians serving in professional historian capacity who presented compelling research that speaks directly opposite of what you're saying right now. So I'd just like this to go on the record, that what you are saying is factually incorrect.
And they spoke to the Missouri Compromise. They spoke to all the elements of history that played into slavery.
Of course not. That's not how causality works. Things are
Well, no. If you're going to look at the big picture, you're going to look at the big picture, and you can't beeline into one thing saying this is the sole focus of why.
I don't
His
think this is the
invention
form.
was
Let's give you a chance
fantastic,
to finish.
and it was, something that in the southern states we were taught. This guy was kind of a hero, because for any of you who haven't been in a cotton field in the middle of summer at 100 degrees with humidity at 110%, cotton doesn't grow in shade. And so his invention alone kept their hours out there minimized, because they were able to produce and get it out of there. I think you're very mistaken. You have a slanted view of the history of what he did.
No, I disagree with you.
Okay.
We disagree. We have to agree we disagree. The evidence that we found, we researched, showed that this device expanded slavery. That yes, it expanded cotton production in the United States, but it de facto expanded slavery. We looked at references from the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, and which also verified what we concluded. So we may have to agree that we disagree on the point, but I strongly disagree with you that our report is slanted. And in addition to that, we gave very careful consideration to the comments that members of the community presented to us. And we do have people in the community who expressed what you just said. But we also had many other members of the community who would disagree with what you're asserting.
Aside from that, I'd just like to add, we can sit here and argue about the expansion of slavery for hours and hours and not come to a compromise. Another thing that we considered that is non-negligible, Melanie, is the perception of the town based on a logo, the perception of the town based on the symbols that the town chooses to portray itself. Regardless of what you might think about the causes of slavery expansion, regardless of what you might think about the ingeniousness of Eli Whitney, one fact is indisputable, and that is that the cotton gin is a symbol of African American slavery in the United States, as seen by preeminent historical institutions such as the Smithsonian. So when we put something like that on our town seal, this is what we're telegraphing to the rest of the world.
So why not change it out to interchangeable parts? Because that was another one of his inventions.
That's
Why wouldn't you take pride? I feel like you're trying to stifle a hero. He was along the lines of like a Ben Franklin with his ingenuity.
Well, yeah,
And so I'm thinking, so you're so opposed to that one vision. He still did many other great things, even if you're opposed to the one thing, not knowing really what it did in that part of the country.
I think you might be misunderstanding the charge of this committee and the work of this committee. The work of this committee wasn't all of us in a room sitting there talking about the contributions of Eli Whitney. The work of this committee over the period of 1 year was to meet with as many people as possible, solicit responses.
244?
413.
Oh, 413. I'm sorry,
413.
Out of 20,000.
Once again, as a professional statistician, I can, one anecdote that I can bring up, maybe that will illustrate my point, is the famous Reader's Digest survey fiasco, in which they surveyed 2.1 million people and wrongfully predicted the winning president of the United States. That sample was vast. We don't have obviously millions or even thousands of responses, but the problem with that sample was its unrepresentativeness. We took great care to reach out to very diverse, very different stakeholders in this town. Not just one category of people. We searched far and wide. So we believe that our sample is representative despite its lack of size. However, for statistical inference to be valid, if you're familiar with statistics at all, you need 10 responses pro and 10 responses against for statistical inference to be valid. For the sample not to actually exceed 10% of the population for it to be valid. So we're not violating any statistical rules with a sample of 413. Perhaps it doesn't agree with what you think, but there's nothing professionally wrong with this.
Somebody who's familiar with statistics.
Yes.
I really would like to know, were you not concerned with the sizable amount of people who were ambivalent to all of this?
Yes.
And 413 responses in a town, let's use 12,000 as a round number for taxpayers.
Yep.
Not counting young people. Okay. I would be concerned about the ambivalence shown. Whether it's change the seal or adopt the 1913 seal. And this goes back to the point that was made before, that there are other things to focus on. I don't view, as a marketer, I don't view the logo, the seal as a logo. Okay? It's a legal representation of the town. It's not a logo by its strict definition. Okay? But I am, just as a citizen, I've been in this town for 50 years. And as a citizen, I'm concerned about the ambivalence we show, not just in this, but in a number of other areas. But this being such a potentially divisive thing, I'm concerned that statistically your response is not a true representative sample when I look at the end. Sorry, the total population. Okay?
So, once again, as for a sample to be representative, it need not be a certain percentage of the population in statistical terms.
In statistical terms, but let's
Exactly.
talk practically. 413 responses, and
Yes.
they're not all in favor. Okay, you had 59% of your responses
Right.
in favor,
Yep.
so 244.
Uh-huh.
Out of either 12,000 taxpayers, right, residents, or 21,000 individuals, including young people in the town. It's not a very large size. It's less than, it's on one hand, it's about 4%, on the other hand, it's 2%. Now, we can argue about representation at town meeting and all of
I was
that.
just gonna say
Yeah.
that.
Right.
I was
We
just
can.
gonna say that.
And you know, clearly, and I've looked at all the raw data going back to 2000.
I think
And
that,
I understand, you know, where statistically we stand with town meeting representation.
if
We're
that,
lucky if we get to 2%.
so if that point were valid, then we would need to negate all of the town meetings results,
Well-
because none of them have representation of over 413
Not
people.
legally. Not legally we can't, but that's
But that's the
beside-
point that I make,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, I guess, number one, my concern is whether or not you were concerned as a committee about the ambivalence in the response, and I think I heard you are. Is that correct? Did I hear correctly?
That was about
About
the
am-
totals?
Yeah,
ambivalence,
I mean, you have 96 to 98% of the population that didn't respond
so no,
to
so we
your
were,
request.
at one point, we decided to stop gathering information
Yeah.
because we started getting
Repetitive.
repetitive
Okay.
responses. And so, once again, you know, we had a charge, which was to collect information. We felt that we gave it our best efforts to collect that information. We felt that we have reached a point where we started getting repetitive responses, and we felt like that was a good stopping point. We also felt that having attended town meetings, knowing that even the hottest button topics don't draw this kind of a response, that this was, in terms of local politics, a significant sample, and in terms of statistics, certainly, and a not insignificant one. I wanted to clarify something. When you say ambivalent, do you worry about the ambiguous responses, the maybes, or do you worry about the,
The percentage of the
I see.
population that did not
I see.
respond can either be seen as disengaged, ambivalent,
I see.
or just plain not
Well,
interested.
certainly, on
Yeah.
some personal level, we were concerned about this, meaning that we would have loved to see a more robust community response as people who volunteered to serve in a committee. As you feel probably because you volunteered to serve in this committee, you would probably want to see more folks coming in and taking a more active part in local politics. But once again, all things considered, I think.
My only other suggestion to you is that it might be helpful,
Mhm.
I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but it might be helpful before you make your presentation to the town, that you have a little better understanding of what the costs might be, even if they're estimates, okay? Certainly if you have a design person, they might be able to give you some idea of what the cost might be to engage a design firm. If we go to that step, recognizing that you've got 3 articles there and it's a 3-step process, okay? Because that question is bound to come up.
Right.
Yes, sorry, Walter.
Did you want to go, Ron?
Oh, sure.
You haven't talked
Yeah,
yet.
Ron.
That's all right.
I'll talk at
Oh, I
the
didn't
end.
see that hand up there.
No, that's all right. No, I thank you for your presentation. Thank you for all the work you put into this. I was impressed with the effort. I guess my question is, was there anybody on the committee who was desirous to keep the town seal?
No, we had, no, in the end, we were, each of the decisions was unanimous to change it. And this is after 18 meetings, a full year of analysis, having gone through some of the committee members couldn't go to all 3 of the public hearings, but after that and digesting the many comments that we did receive, and just as a point of information, and we're happy to share all that information, and that information is public record. It should be on the town website. The response, the actual
Oh, yes,
responses.
yes.
The depth with which people wrote was quite substantive. So with that all said, we had a couple committee members who were concerned about preserving Eli Whitney's legacy, and I'm one of those. I'm one of those people. But we felt that relative to our charge, that is already, it has been done, and the town can continue to do that if it wishes to. It can expand it if compared to what we do now. But again, we were concerned overall with how much is this going to cost, how to achieve this, and by returning to a 109-year-old town seal, we felt that was a good, healthy way to be able to speak to both the town's heritage and to something that's less divisive. And those were ideas that really drove us.
Could I just add one thing to just make sure, if I understand your question correctly, you asked whether or not there were folks on the committee who were in disagreement with, right. So I just want to prevent this from sounding as though this was a committee maybe selectively chosen. None of us knew each other, first of all, before we walked into that room, right? My understanding was, although we made a conscious choice to not state our positions in the first session, there was some talk about, do we want to go around the room and all say how we feel about this? We decided not to. And one of the reasons why we decided not to was because we wanted to preserve that neutrality throughout the process. We didn't want to go into the process from the very first meeting saying, I want X or I want Y. Through the presentations and the conversations that emerged in these meetings, at least to me, it was clear that there were several folks in the committee like you who were concerned about preserving Eli Whitney's legacy or, undermining the historic nature of the town. And so there certainly was not homogeneity in that regard a priori when we walked into the room. Through the process of information gathering, hearing the presentations and doing research, we all landed in the same place in terms of changing the seal. And so just to be sure that it's understood and on record and is very clear, we were not a homogeneous group when we walked into the room. We all arrived at the same unanimous decision after the process.
I think you hit the root of my question,
Yes.
which is you're obviously very passionate about how you feel. And I just wanted to make sure that the people who were in the committee were representative of the town itself.
That was just me, I'm the outlier.
No, we were.
Yeah.
No, we were. And I can tell you a number of times I would sit in the meeting, especially as we were in last October, going into November, December, and I'd say, okay, should we speak? Should I say something? And I was one of the proponents of saying, no, we should just keep our opinions to ourselves until we gather more information. I think it's quite telling that the 9 of us arrived at the same spot. That is very telling. We had people who, in some of the comments, made statements such as Eli Whitney had invented the cotton gin in Westborough. Well, he didn't invent it. He invented it in New Haven, Connecticut. And he left Westborough to go to Yale when he was 17, and did not come back to the community. Does that mean we should dismiss him? No. Interchangeable parts, he did a lot more, Melanie mentioned that earlier. And should we have looked at switching to that instead? Well, we thought that relative to our charge, if we started to go down the road of what would we replace it with instead, that it was going to veer from our charge. And we thought that would be the responsibility of a future committee to do that or not do that. Then the 1913 seal, I was a strong proponent. I still remain a very staunch proponent of doing that. I think it's pragmatic to do this. I also think it's a middle ground. I also, and for the third time tonight, it speaks to the heritage of the community. It's from the original formation when town seals were required by the Commonwealth that we have. So there were just, you start to hear from me, like there was an awful lot of thought process behind this. We had numerous conversations about this.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to speak to the point that this committee here didn't come up with the idea of being a committee. The town meeting asked for this, and so you guys have fulfilled a request of a town meeting. So I think from that point of view, it's yes, maybe there's a million other more important things, but this was what town meeting requested, and that's
The town meeting requested it because it was put forward by a group. They
But
didn't
a
come out of the
majority
blue
of
and say,
town
hey, are we
meeting-
gonna change our seal? There was a group that requested.
But it was voted on.
But
It was
Yeah, no,
voted
voted
on.
on,
I know,
approved
but
by
I'm
the
just
town meeting.
saying, it wasn't just out of the blue.
I
What
mean,
was the-
spontaneous,
Yeah,
yeah, no, it's, but
No,
the town
I
did
didn't
vote
say
on
it was
it.
spontaneous. It said
What was the
that
We have to honor
town,
that.
town meeting asked
I don't know
for
if there
this to
was
happen.
like, I don't know if they,
I have to go
they
back and look at the minutes, but
I
there
can't
was,
remember why either.
the article was, not sure right now who proposed the article to the town meeting, but that's inconsequential because it was presented and the town voted on
And
it.
it voted, and
That's that.
So
was there any
the-
discussion about changing the
There
name of the
wasn't, no.
street?
No, that was not
It was not part of our charge.
No, I understand that, but
They said
as
together.
as you talk about keeping heritage, to eliminate somebody entirely feels,
Yeah, I
a
don't
little
think-
disloyal, but whatever. Yeah,
I don't
I mean,
think
this
it's
is
gone
y'all's
down
gig,
like that.
so
I
Okay,
mean,
I'm
just
a
wanted to
southerner.
finish.
Well,
All right, let Walter
Something.
finish his question,
Okay,
please.
sorry, Walter.
So I think town meeting has a perfect option ahead of them because, well, aside from accepting hearing a report, which I think is not even a real question, but they have a choice. Go with your theory, or if you really want to do something with interchangeable parts or other things, vote for the second one. Or if you want to keep the seal exactly as it is, vote down both B and C. And so, and that's as good as we can do. We're not going to, have a larger poll than a town meeting for something like this. And I also, I agree, your charge was not to do anything with every other use of Eli Whitney. As an engineer, I certainly valued his contribution for interchangeable parts much more than the cotton gin. But I honestly, when I moved to town, thought the cotton gin on the seal was a sled because we're famous for making sleds, and it kind of looks like one. And I did not realize it was that. But anyway.
I mean, it was drawn by a high schooler, so,
You know,
Well, it's also usually shown pretty small.
yes.
So, that's the biggest one I've ever seen. So, and that
It looks like a
looks a
sled.
lot more like a cotton gin.
To address the
It's like-
point of sort of forgetting historical memory and forgetting Eli Whitney or erasing them from history is another phrase I heard tonight. Although that was not a part of the charge of the committee in the beginning of our work, we did thoughtfully address that, and that also came up in Dr. Baber's presentation, which is available in its entirety online, where he made a really compelling point about preserving history in places that are designed to preserve history, like museums and the library. and archives and places like that, not necessarily symbols of the local government.
And with the intent being to provide context.
Exactly.
And to provide explanation. So rather than it just being there on a particular symbol, in this case, a particular seal, you could have additional context. So we are, we talked about other types of symbols, and we did early on. We did have some discussion about that. We had a discussion about why the sleigh is on the town street signs, and it turned out that that was done apparently by an act of the Board of Selectmen, then the Selectmen, today the Select Board. I guess what I'm saying in a roundabout way is, we feel very strongly that we covered our bases on looking at this and looking at it in an enormous amount of detail. I think it's quite telling that the 9 of us came to this conclusion, I would argue, independently of each other, through very robust discussion.
Any other questions?
It's more of a comment, sort of along the same lines as your comment about researching the cost. I think in your presentation, you really shied away from the cotton gin, and I think that in the current seal, and I think that is going to be the the lightning rod for most people. And when you present at town meeting, I would spend some time in your presentation trying to educate people, because once you get into the Q&A, it'll be hard to do that. And why the committee came out the way they did and the research that you did, and I think that's important to get out up front.
It's in the report and we talked about it.
I know it's in the report.
Yes.
I was
We thought-
aware of it, but
yeah.
when you presented to us tonight, I don't think you mentioned it until you sat
Right.
down in the Q&A part. And at that point, it's really hard to educate people,
Right.
because they're asking questions
Yeah.
often to advance their point, not to listen to your opinion.
I think that's great advice, Gene, as far as nipping that in the bud in advance, where that clearly is going to be the contentious issue, and to address that before it even comes up,
Well,
rather than getting people yelling at each other across
Yeah.
the floor at high school.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No, it's fine.
interrupt you when you finish your thought. We had a number of comments that simply put, that folks thought that the residents of the community thought this was too busy, that just visually it was too busy.
Yeah.
That
I've always thought that.
it was just, so aside from whether the town hall should be there or the cotton gin should be on it or what have you, that just this representation is just too muddy for the community, and so that might merit redesign of the seal. Is one of the arguments, an additional argument for returning to the 1913 town seal, that it's clean, it's straightforward, and again, it's not divisive.
Nobody likes the pie crust.
Yeah.
Nobody likes the pie crust.
And we've had a number of people ask
That
why.
was
I
the
think
only
the pie
person
crust
who liked the
is
pie crust.
cool.
Here's the one vote for the pie crust.
Statistically
I'll keep the pie
insignificant.
crust.
One and
We
not
have-
you as a
like the pie
person.
We had a number of people asking us,
We found the
why
one
is it
outlier.
green also? And so the color was changed in the 70s as part of some tip of the hat to the environmental movement, apparently. That's what we were told. Why it's yellow, we can't get a straight answer why it's yellow. Why it's, the Ranger red around the border, which reads Westborough and Incorporated, that's pretty straightforward. The red and the white, which traditionally was, Ranger red and white, is traditionally the colors of the high school. That makes sense. But the other color scheme, yeah, it's more reminiscent of baseball team logos and things like that.
We may very well end up with no representation of whatever seal is chosen or designed on any of our vehicles.
I was just going to say that, because
Yeah, I mean,
sorry.
it's up to the individual department
Right.
managers at this stage, as far as I know. I haven't heard
It is.
anything from the
It's
town.
taken so long to get vehicles though, that this could be on everything.
For a long time.
But I was actually gonna make that point, or it could be a follow-up of, hey, if we actually adopt this seal, then it needs to be applied across the, not that we have to, but we could discuss that. Where I think
It's entirely possible.
it's interesting to see it kind of a rogue seal on a lot of the police uniforms or some of the other stuff around town. So I think getting a town seal that not only gets reviewed and researched by a committee such as you folks, but then a design committee, I think also co-opting the boards and the deciders who actually apply the seal so that there is some unity. And that was one of the big words that you folks mentioned today, was unity and unification, and it's tough to represent the whole town with 500 people, but it's tough to hit up 12,000 people get their response.
Or more.
Yeah.
Do you have a bigger picture of the original, by chance?
The
Original
1913?
town
I want to see
seal?
the
It's in the
seal.
report.
We have the seal,
You
we
have
should
the
use it.
report?
We have the seal, we should use
Yeah,
it.
but I just want to see a bigger on, I just
Um,
want to see a big picture of it.
That's probably the best one I have in this presentation.
It's about as benign as it's gonna get.
Um,
You know, yeah, I don't think, actually, let me go back for a moment. No, the other one, I think it's just slightly larger.
Okay, well, it's not our charge to
Yeah,
be
it's fine.
working through designs tonight.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you for
uh,
coming in.
Thank you for all the work.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much for all the work and for coming in.
It's a contentious
And,
issue too.
And, yeah, dealing with the contentious piece of it.
So just to make sure we're clear, so some estimates about cost.
I think that would be
On those,
helpful
okay.
personally, I don't know.
About cost, if we, so
Cost
for example,
always
at the
helps.
police station, which you brought up.
Yeah.
And then more explanation, go directly about.
I think
about
up front, I think
something
once you get
about
into the
content.
Q and A,
Okay.
you're not gonna sway anyone.
That's why we came tonight.
Warm up, we call this warm up for town meeting.
Yeah. That's why we came, yeah. So,
Super helpful. As bad as it's
I wanna
gonna
Just to let you know that we will not be voting on this until at least October 3rd, maybe even later. We're trying to work our schedule through and then vote toward the end of, as we get closer to town meeting. So,
And on behalf of our committee, thank you very much for your questions. Thank you for your candor. I think we kind of heard a snapshot of what we're probably going to hear at town meeting, to be honest, and that's good. That's always helpful, as you know.
we're all community representatives.
Absolutely. And,
I hope the rest of your meeting goes smoothly. Thank you.
Thank you,
for
thank you
this.
very much.
Thanks so much
for
for
your
coming
time.
in.
And good luck with the school year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, coming up.
Oh,
The games begin.
so we'll give them a chance to gather their belongings and then we'll move on to the next.
Have a good day.
Yeah, you go out, you know where it is, Tom?
Westborough TV that.
All 10 people who are
Oh, I
watching.
have a whole stack of just, agendas.
Yeah, those were intended for anybody who
Oh,
showed
all
up this
people
evening.
showed up?
all the agenda.
Yeah, I was like,
What
wait
kind
a
of
minute, it's
agenda
a
do
lot
you
of
have?
information.
What agenda do you have, Melvin?
Okay, just remember the
We got all of
recording,
them.
remember the recording is on,
Yes.
folks. Live mic.
Thanks.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Nice
you.
to meet you. Thank you so
You too.
much.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
There they go.
Westborough's finest ambulance, we just wait for tomorrow.
Or overwork, number eight.
What's next?
What is next is tax, a little follow-up on the tax classification. I'm just gonna wait for Tom to return and then we'll get into that. We will sit in silence.
Afraid to say anything.
I know, I just said, you're all mine,
What's the
it's like,
The vote that we won't take until October?
Usually what we do is we wait until we've heard from every department and have looked at every article, And
I
then
think it's a point of order question about,
Yeah.
since there's two,
3 articles.
well,
Yeah.
setting aside the article asking for
Yeah.
permission to present the report,
Yeah.
on the 2 articles, will this committee need to support only one of the articles? Could they support both of the articles?
Or
Okay.
none of the
Or none of
articles.
Or none of the
Yeah.
articles, yeah,
No, you could vote in each one independently,
okay,
That is the majority.
because
right.
you also know that if the first one passes, the second one will be moved to pass over, and then we could, on town meeting floor, decide to support that motion or not.
Right,
There's also the
take them out of
option,
order too,
Right.
at town meeting, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, there'd be separate votes, okay,
there's also the option, as we did with the issue of indigenous peoples and Columbus Day,
Similar.
not take a stand as a committee because of the nature of what was being proposed and the divisiveness issue, and left it to the town committee in their collective wisdom to make the decision on that article. So that is always an option for us as well.
Don't you think though, as a community, it's not about the divisiveness about this. It really is, it comes down to the money. Because this is not a high priority. We have so many other things, and the cost, when people can't give you a cost on stuff, it makes me wary of, you can change over at any, as the timeline predicts. What does that mean? I don't understand that.
I think it's as you buy a new police car or a new fire engine, if you're gonna put the town
We
seal
keep
on
our
it.
fire engines for 25 years.
That's where he's going, it'll be slow.
Then it would be
May not
25
change.
years.
Or they
30
might decide to go buy a set of decals and put that on. I
That's what I
don't
was
even know
gonna
how
say.
they're
Might
put
just
on.
But there would be
Decal
some
over it.
incongruity in
Big time.
the whole
Yeah.
look of the town if
There
you're
already is
looking for,
where-
yeah, there
Already
is.
is where a lot of.
We spell the town name differently depending upon the sign of
But a
it.
lot of the departments don't even use the official seal.
Yeah.
They got a home load seal.
They do?
That's where I think it'd be cool if we had a single seal. Well,
Never mind.
Okay.
let's
I was just
go to the
curious.
article.
All right,
Stick to it.
let's give some thought to the report. I thought it was a well-done report. Let's give some thought to what they're talking about. We all have different perspectives on it. I think Melanie brought a unique perspective tonight. Well, no, I don't know
To be
anybody in
honest with
this
you, I
room
don't care
that's
what
ever
vendor
picked.
you seal. I don't care, I'm not gonna be here.
Self
But-
Mason Dixon, it's cool to hear
Yeah.
that side of it.
But let's give some thought to it, and then when it comes time to vote on these articles, we can have a little more of a discussion. Is that okay with you folks? Or you want-
I just had one question regarding the articles.
Yes.
So the people that are coming before us to present, are they also presenting to the selectmen in a separate meeting?
Uh,
Sometimes.
Sometimes. So for
Okay.
example, I know, I was informed today that the selectmen will probably want to meet with the fire chief about the ambulance article. It's up to the committees to determine whether or not they have enough information from the article itself and the explanation that's written by the town manager's office to vote on the article, or whether we have additional questions and we'd like to meet with the folks who are proposing the particular article. And usually when it comes to, looking at past history, when it comes to the large departments, we generally want to meet with them, but we also recognize that we do not want to be just bringing people in for the sake of bringing them in, because, they have jobs to do on a regular basis. They spend a lot of time for this town, and so, we're trying to be judicious in our approach to what we want to do. And the size of the ask is also, a driving factor.
We have a charge to make recommendations to town meeting to dive in deeper and understand this stuff. And sometimes watching the select board meeting, you see the presentations, but you don't get to ask questions at the select board meetings because we're not selectees or whatever it's called. So I do think it's good for us and it's good for the proponents to understand our concerns and questions, which may not be the same as there. But yeah, in the in the big annual town meeting, that's why we have the all-day budget meeting, because they drag in the big ones and they give one presentation to both groups and everybody can ask questions because of the time of that. But on these other things, it's sometimes important to have your own shot at asking questions, or at least I feel it. But we always decide as a group who we want to have in or not.
Okay, let's move on. I don't know, I know some of you were either, I know Gene, you and I were at the last select board meeting. I don't know who else had a chance to watch it or go
It's
back.
helpful when you give us the minute, 1:45.
That was great,
forward.
yeah.
Yeah,
Very helpful.
I tried,
Give me the cliff notes, that was perfect.
yeah, but, yeah.
Seriously, it's
Okay,
super helpful.
no, I appreciate that. So, the comment was made that there's going to be, at the next meeting of the select board, there's going to be a time for public input. And I think they're working on how they want to schedule that. My own impression from what we heard was we got a lot of information in the last two select board meetings when this was covered, a lot of detailed numbers from a very bright guy, John Steinberg, who, has his thumb on all of this, obviously. In looking at the amount of information and in looking at the complexity of it, I think Gene and I agreed when we walked out of the room, wow, complex. Somewhere along the lines, we've got to simplify this so that it's a little more digestible and understandable, if that's possible. So the next time that the select board will take this up, I am told, and I have heard, will be on September 13th at that meeting date.
Tuesday,
So
right?
I encourage everyone on the advisory committee to make every effort, if not to attend. And I know you're all busy, and I think I'm the only retired person here, to at least watch it when you have an opportunity on Westborough TV. That said, you want to make some comment about what you heard, or you want to wait until?
Matt, I could talk a little bit about it now if you want.
Yeah, why don't you?
If you'd
Why
rather
don't you?
wait on
Yeah.
that.
Walter and I had a conversation today, and some really.
Pass out. I'm passing out.
I'll do that.
Well, you can get somebody.
This was exactly what I was wondering.
Yeah. So,
I'm sorry.
4:37.
So, I watched it on television, and I had a little trouble on TV watching it. So, but as Mr. Steinberg said, his presentations are on his assessor website. So I, got to see the whole thing where I could actually read it. So I thought this was the most interesting thing to me, which really changed my whole a lot of my thinking on this was that he did a scenario if we had done this 6 years ago, and with a 10% change, and the number doesn't matter exactly, but if you're going to keep that same 10%, what became clear to me from this is, yes, you save that initial $437 as an average family home, and that continues sort of forever. But the next year you have the exact same tax increase you would have had you not done this, and every year after that. So at the end of his example, it's $2,500, but that comes out to be exactly $437 a year, which is the first number times 6. And it sort of makes sense, and it sort of makes a little clear why a lot of towns start moving towards the higher number. It's the only way. So from that point of view, it strikes me more than when I first thought about this anyway, that it's more of a one-time solution and not some magical solution. And that our understanding that if we increase budgets every year because inflation, because salary increase as whatever, the taxes necessarily go up unless somehow you have some huge, growth in town that doesn't, well, Westborough's sort of kind of built out, to some extent. I don't think you're gonna see the levels that we'll get there. But anyway, I found that was I thought this was a very good piece of data and one part of the puzzle, and certainly different than I thought going into the example. And I, for the first time, saw why people move up the scale, so to speak, because it's the only way to prevent the next year from being the same as it was going to be anyway. It's just fascinating to me. And I agree completely how complex and hard to do it. Originally I was thinking, oh, well, so you try it. You throw out 5% there, and you learn by doing that. And that's not so much, but you would get an experience. Maybe that's a good way to do it. Maybe not.
Experiential learning.
Yeah, but there are so many other factors as to what year you happen to do it and when you had what, and, that it's very fascinating how interactive and complex the thing is. So I don't know how, if you guys think we could simplify it, but I'm not sure how you do that, just because there's a lot more to this.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, please, go ahead.
I think in some sense you just did simplify it versus the presentations that we've seen so far. I mean, I sat through those too. I realize this as well. It is a one-time thing unless you keep increasing the percentage, and there's a cap to what you can increase the percentage, and you can't really go down. Well, you can, but then it's a huge hit to the residential portion, and that, I think you just simplified it a little bit compared to the, I think it's sort of the less percentages and numbers and examples and more just sort of talking through it, I think, in terms of simplifying.
What do you mean by huge hit to the residential?
If you do a 10% shift over to non-residential, and then later you decide to undo it, then the residential side's going to get hit with that year's tax increase plus the 10%
Okay.
coming back. So they get, it's hard once you shift, it's hard to undo the shift.
In his because I was there, in his presentation, he said there have been communities that have shifted from one to the other,
Mm-hmm.
And then back again.
and back again, almost as if they didn't find it successful, or they didn't find benefit from it.
We don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why they did it. In some cases, it was, like he said, there's so many causes of what makes this property or that property worth more or less. It's hard to figure out.
Rod?
So, I was a member of the Economic Development Committee and certainly understand the importance of a single tax rate. That being said, this year we faced an unprecedented raise in the residential rate based on the values of the residential versus the industrial. And if there was ever a year that we were going to make this shift, I would say that this would be the type of year that we would do it. And my hope would be, as the industrial commercial expands in Westborough, that percentage starts to flip back the other way, and we perhaps can go back at a certain point to a single tax rate. But I think, if ever there was a year that we should consider it for the taxpayers of Westborough, this is the year.
Yeah, which is, I think, partially why we were bringing it up this year, particularly as a group, because we met and talked about what issues we wanted to talk about, and this, a lot of us certainly feel that way, and that could be absolutely correct.
With all of the issues that we looked at last year that we wanted to get into more depth on, this one came right to the top. And that's why I'm going to suggest that that we devote a good part of Thursday's meeting to this subject matter. To give everybody a chance to go back, look at the data, and let's just have a conversation to start understanding, because if we're gonna represent the town meeting and the taxpayers, we should understand what this classification issue is all about, how it affects both sides, the industrial and the commercial side. And it's not gonna be a, as I said to somebody today, there's no predetermined outcome that we would be looking to reach. We should let the facts take us where they go and try to come up with some recommendation building on what the select board is doing as well. And that sometime after the first of the year, try to formulate, based on our own analysis, what we would recommend. Ron, I do understand what you're saying about this would be the year, and it might very well. I'm also concerned, even though people keep saying that, you know, that the housing market is shifting again. We had an anomaly, a really large anomaly with the values this, you know, the past year. And if it happens again, then I would really get concerned, or anywhere near that number. Because if you look at what made up the total levy, there were two items that stood out for the majority of the cost. And that was the value increase in the residential property and the contract obligations that we had at the schools. I think that was close to $1,000 of the average increase that was voted on in the budget. So hopefully we won't have that kind of anomaly again. But I'm at this stage, I'd like to see what the public has to say at the select board meeting as well. And also there'll be a tax classification meeting sometime, I think it's after the end of October. Am I right about that? Do you know when that?
It's October, end of October, early
Yeah,
November.
early November. And I'd like to see
That's what he
what the
said.
public's response to that meeting is as well. You know, if I listen to these folks tonight, small number of respondents, small number of people in attendance on occasion. Let's see what the public is feeling about this whole issue over the next couple of meetings that are going to be devoted to it. But that doesn't mean our conversation should wait. I think we need to start getting more grounded in this subject matter and have a better understanding about it. If for anything, our own personal education as well. Any questions about that? Concerns? If somebody has a different idea, please don't hesitate.
Then it sounds like, I don't know that we have the bandwidth to have a formalized opinion before this next tax classification hearing, which was one of my concerns when people didn't want to talk about it last spring, because I thought we should have gotten started, because it takes a long time. But that said, most of the information we've gotten was through select board meetings, which has been very useful.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Okay.
it's hard with the amount that we have to do for this fall town meeting in the next same period of time.
Yeah.
To completely develop this.
No, I don't think we should, yeah, I agree with you, Walter. I don't think this should be completely developed until we get past the fall town meeting. And then we can really devote some time to it. And, you know, we'll have a little more bandwidth to be able to deal with it more effectively. Get in people we need to hear from. Be able to do some individual research and understand this a little better. But I think just keeping the conversation going over the next few weeks is going to be helpful to us. Okay. All right. That said, are there any liaison reports? Melanie?
I have several. So, I spoke with the police department. And we had a busy little town last night, 7 arrests. Yeah. And the gist of the conversation centers around, they don't have enough manpower, basically, for what's coming down the pike. And, you know, as a town person, I hate to see something tragic or catastrophic happen because we don't have the right staffing. And I know they feel the same way. It's, you know, if you look at our study, we were supposed to be at 44, they're right now at 40. And some of the things I was trying to explain, last night, some of the things that transpired, the officer that was on for that shift, when I talked to the police chief at almost 1:30 in the afternoon, was still sitting doing reports. So he was working from 6 p.m. and it was 1 o'clock the next afternoon. And it has to be done because the things that have been found is if you're going to go to court, you have to have kind of all your ducks in a row or these guys walk. And we don't want that happening either. But again, I think we're going to see something here soon with regard to staffing and the request for, you know, staffing and ramping it up. Same thing kind of goes with the fire department.
Well,
because,
before you go to fire,
yep.
where's the police department in terms of hiring those 3 officers that town meeting approved?
They're not there yet. They've had some candidates. And I have to say, I kind of, in talking with Chief Laurie, I applaud the fact that he doesn't want a warm body just to fill the spot. He wants to get the right mix for the town. He wants to get, you know, and we should appreciate that because it takes a lot of money out of our coffers to train and get somebody up and running, no matter, you know, what you're doing in public service. And so he doesn't want to just waste the money getting that warm body. And so that's all I know about that, is that he's interviewing, there's some things that didn't pan out, I think, according to plan, but that's the way hiring goes, and we all know that right now, if you're in any sort of business. So, that being said, I know that they're actively searching. He doesn't want to necessarily lean on taking people fresh out of the academy, because fresh out of the academy takes almost an even longer learning curve, I think, and training period, than necessarily getting somebody who's seasoned coming to us from another town. So he's taking that into consideration too.
Thank you.
Yeah. To the police department, to the fire department, these guys, same thing. A lot of times when you have a police call, fire has to go out. If you have a mental health call, fire has to go out. The thing that we're finding, again, understaffed, which means when you do have to kind of tap on your per diem, your overtime, those numbers run up quickly. And so those numbers almost offset the cost of, why don't we just hire another, fireman? So they are going to come to us in this, I believe, fall town meeting with a request for a new ambulance. And the lead time on some of this stuff, let me backtrack. For police, we approved those cruisers. He ordered them a year ago. They're saying maybe November. So the lead time on these things are extraordinary. It used to be like a year to build a fire truck. Now they're saying like 2 to 2.5. Well, if you wait and your engine is on its last leg, that's kind of a scary proposition to think that we have substandard going out there, or our guys are out there riding in substandard.
But we don't now.
No. And I don't know if any of you have ever taken a tour of our fire department. You can eat off the floor. It is so meticulous, and they take such great pride in the equipment. They clean everything. They're pretty great. But back to the ambulance. I work at a hospital. I know that we get a bazillion ambulances in per day. There's a thing called holding the wall, and that means if your emergency room is full, the ambulance is sitting in your bay waiting to be able to get the patient in. Because sometimes it's not as emergent as, you know, a heart attack or a stroke or something like that, right? When you hold the wall though, your vehicle's still running, all of your equipment is still running, you're still expending, you know, it's wear and tear on the life of something. And so I think, you know, if you think, oh wow, we're already through an ambulance, well, it's been a rough couple of 2.5 years, and we've really beat up our stuff. So again, they're thinking lead time is gonna be very long, and so they're gonna come to us now for funding in knowing that it's gonna be a delay in actually getting what they need, probably.
Are they bringing, this ambulance was on the capital equipment list, as I recall seeing. Are they
For
bringing?
like our 5-year plan?
Yeah, are they
Yes.
bringing
I
it
think they're
forward?
gonna bring it forward sooner,
Okay.
related
Well,
to.
the article's in.
Yeah,
So-
related to the delay. And again, I think we have to take into consideration that our equipment over the past 2.5 years has gotten beat up tremendously. And it is what it is, but we don't want them out there in something that's not gonna work or not fulfill what it needs to do.
Yeah, they've got another one scheduled. They have one for 2024, which is the budget.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then they've got another one for 2027. So,
So 2026, if they still take a long time.
yeah,
Right.
obviously they're,
But we'll see.
Hopefully
We're
they're
a ways
also-
from that.
They'll push it forward.
you don't.
And then lastly, I also spoke to the health department today. And not necessarily a lot going on other than, believe it or not, monkeypox.
Mm.
There are some, the state is having a rise in cases. I think she said 2 exposed, and they're, you know, overseeing that. Because there's actually a 21-day,
Yeah,
which surprised me.
yeah, me too.
Because if you think about it, in the industry I'm in, that's a long incubation period with regard to keeping somebody, you know, sequestered, and whether you've been exposed and then how long.
3
Yeah,
weeks.
that's a long, it's a long time. People still popping in for COVID tests, obviously, but she's getting those from the state. I mean, she didn't anticipate in necessarily any great ask coming forward, but, you know.
Did they get anywhere? At one point, they were researching this whole trash pickup stuff, but I don't know if they, and people thought it might even come to this meeting, but it's not.
No.
No, it's not.
The other, one other thing we talked about was the opioid. I don't know, I wasn't aware, but maybe y'all were. I think it came from a class action lawsuit. So our community was awarded a part of a class action lawsuit and the state divvied up, I guess, amongst the communities for opioid, kind of the miscommunication that came with the pharmaceutical companies. And so there were 4 kind of organizations, fire, police, youth and family, and then health department kind of vying for the funds, but not really. They're trying to work in conjunction with one another, because it doesn't matter. We're all on the same page with regard to what can we do to reduce use and addiction and, you know, exposure to the drug. So they're trying to figure out how best to utilize the funds. So they're sitting there, and I think, you know, the 4 organizations are trying to work together, which is, you know, a great thing, because we get far too many overdoses.
What's the
I
rough
see.
dollar value on the?
You know what, she didn't mention money. I was gonna look it up after we got off the
Yeah.
phone. As a polite southerner, I didn't wanna ask money.
That's what we do here.
Wait.
That's what we do here. That's what we do.
Let me get that down.
Please put that in the notes.
That's on recording.
We got some polite southern.
I wonder if it's 10 grand or 50 or.
I would, the
Yeah, who knows?
lawsuit's
Rather
been pretty
stab at it.
substantial. In fact, I wanna say, somewhere in the Midwest, somewhere in Missouri, where a whole town, was kind of abuse and addiction was rampant because of, again, the misinformation. The one town in and of itself was awarded millions and millions of dollars because of, what was done.
It's kind of a Pyrrhic victory.
I
What do you think
agree
about
with you.
it?
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
But you know what? If you can turn it around for the youth,
Yeah,
then
I guess.
let's get it going. That's
Anything
it for
else?
me. Nope,
Yeah,
those
I
are my
just-
three, sorry.
Just a note, I don't know if you, I think you all have copies of the capital equipment budget, you don't?
I think
Okay.
so.
I'll be happy to give this to you, but I'm sure it's gonna change. The police department is gonna be looking for vehicles over the next 4 years, right through 2027. Was there any discussion with the fire department about the satellite fire station? Because I noticed in this list that there's money requested or money allocated from 2024 through 2026 to the tune of $14 million. At least that's on the plan. Now this is the plan summary for the current fiscal 23 budget. But,
I know that they're hopeful. There is a need for a satellite or a substation in our community,
Okay.
especially since we're branching out toward Southborough. I think their idea and their concept was to put it on that side of town, obviously, because this will take care of, kind of the original town. But as we've expanded, they're looking more toward Route 9 and toward the Southborough.
why?
Yeah,
This,
there's a lot of neighborhoods, there's a lot of commercial,
they
obviously.
could avoid the downtown rotary
Right.
traffic.
Right. At one time we talked about when that restaurant closed on 9. I can't even.
Chateau.
What is it?
Chateau.
Yeah.
That'd be a good spot.
Wouldn't it be a great spot to like
Really
hop
close.
on for the
Really
business
close, yeah.
part and to hop on to 9,
Yeah, well, they do spend a lot of time on 495 and the Pike, which
That could
would
be a
easy
great location
access
for it.
to.
Yeah.
as well.
The arrest last night, it 3 of the 7, I should go back. 3 of the 7, it resulted in a chase
Wow.
on 9, and this is like 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So old people with babies, they're
That's them.
sleeping.
Worse,
You had no idea this was going on.
Oblivious.
But it resulted in, it got dangerous, so our guys backed off, and luckily they crashed. They lost control of the vehicle.
Yes.
And they were all treated and released from the hospital and sat in our holding cell. But our chief, normally gets in very early to work out, and he actually guarded 7 prisoners. That was his job. He didn't get to work out this morning, but that's because they're understaffed again. But I don't know, interesting.
Okay, thank you, Melanie. Anybody, Rod, comments on,
So just quickly, DPW has a number of articles coming forward. I believe they'll be here October 12th, first band confirmed. And then, September 12th. And then the mass wastewater treatment plant people will be in October 3rd. We've made the request. And they've offered to give us, anyone who's interested, a tour of the wastewater treatment plant.
I'd like to see that.
I'm
Yeah,
very
where-
excited.
Where is it?
It's down by,
Very back. Off kind of behind JP's.
yeah, yep.
Really? Yeah, I would go.
in fact, if you come down Route 9, sometimes if you're looking for 135, you end up making, or the shopping plaza there, if you make a turn too early, you end up at the wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah.
Do they let you leave?
But you can smell it before you get to it, so.
Check out anytime you like.
So the issue for them, and I'm just learning, but in 21, they had an article, they asked for $4 million worth of repairs to the plant. They're coming back for another $4 million because the first $4 million they haven't spent yet, but they found is not adequate. So
Yes.
gonna
I know.
dig deeper, a little deeper into that.
Okay.
Okay.
Walter? Library.
Yeah, the library will be at the planning board tomorrow night at the Forbes building at, nominally 6:30, who knows when their part actually goes on, but that's for the article on the zoning area. And it's
Is the
tomorrow,
planning board
30th.
gonna vote on it tomorrow night?
I mean, it's up to them to, it
I
depends,
think
they
they're-
might say no, rewrite it, or they might say yes, or maybe they don't vote till another meeting, I don't know what the process is, but it is necessary to hold a public meeting as part of this, so this, unless it's continued, then this might be a whole public meeting, and whether they end up voting support for that article or not, I don't really understand.
Anyone else? Okay, let's move to future draft agendas. So Walter and I have been playing with the calendar because several of our invitations came back and asked for different dates. So right now, the school department will not be with us on Thursday night, but they have been offered either Thursday the 8th or Monday the 19th, and I have a feeling based on what I heard from Lisa Edinburgh that it looks like it's going to be the 19th for the school department. The Economic Development Committee has agreed to come in on the 19th as well. And the Water Treatment Board, I think we've got them tentatively scheduled again for October 3rd?
Yep.
Yeah, October 3rd. And the DPW will be coming in as scheduled. We got an email today, and Rod acknowledged that. Library is coming in, the building committee is coming in on the 15th.
September?
September, yeah. Other than the Water Treatment Board, who has some scheduling issues and bid opening issues, I think, Rod?
I think they got the bids. I think,
Yeah,
I
timing
think
issues?
she's out of town for
Oh,
10 days.
right, yeah, one of the key people is out of town for 10 days. So it's okay.
That means we get our tour beforehand.
So do we have a date with town manager yet? Or-
Not yet, I wanted to wait until
See what
things kind of settled and we got the big departments out of the way. Because the town manager and the finance director have demonstrated they can be really flexible when it comes to the AFC. So, but right now, unless we get more warrants, that's the schedule. But stand by because the warrant doesn't close until the 27th. So we've got almost, 30 days from now.
And we're at
uh,
16.
Before the warrant closes.
20, well,
20.
19.
Yeah, yeah. The big asks are library, the water treatment plant, I think is the second biggest. Schools is coming in with an issue, about $569,000 for out-of-district tuition. And the rest, and the DPW obviously collectively has some big numbers there. But I think we should be all right. Hopefully we won't have to be bringing anybody back for a second time, at least for this fall town meeting, hopefully. Just to clarify, the joint fall budget meeting, which is with the school committee and the select board, is really to discuss what they see as issues with the fiscal -- budget. So we'll be hearing from department heads and the finance director, et cetera, on what potential issues may be facing us for the fiscal '24 budget. I'm getting a little ahead, but good to keep that stuff in the back of our minds so that we put, it's part of the context against which we measure and make decisions, I guess, is the way to look at it. Okay, anything else?
Do you want to mention Thursday's meeting?
Oh, thank you, Walter. Yeah. Gonna leave it to you folks. Since the school department's not gonna be with us on Thursday, we can either meet and talk about tax reclassification and have a general conversation about some other subject matter, or we could wait until the next meeting, which won't be until the 8th of the month. So we'll have gone from today, well, if we skip Thursday, we won't have another meeting until the 8th, which is next a week from Thursday. I hate to lose momentum, but I'm going to leave it up to you. If you choose to not meet, we don't have to meet. And we don't have to meet in person. That meeting can be totally remote.
If we were to meet on Thursday,
Yeah.
tax,
I think we need
Split
to talk more about tax classification. And I think there's some other issues I want to, get a little deeper understanding about, just in a general conversation to see what your thinking is about some of these things. Capital equipment. We got the library, we can talk a little bit more about that, but I don't want to preempt their meeting with us. There's some big asks on this warrant so far. And I just want to make sure that we give ourselves enough time to have a general discussion, not feel constrained by a time limit when we're, dealing with departments and then trying to discuss something at the back end of a long meeting. So, again, I leave it up to you. If you have no objections, we'll meet remotely. If you feel you don't want to, then we just won't meet.
I'd vote to skip it.
I'm happy to lose momentum. I'm with Roz.
whoa.
Unless you have specific things, I don't know that we'd get much out of talking about
Right.
tax again
Okay?
without anything new happening between now and then.
Okay?
But if you have other things that you think are
Well, right now
on the
also,
agenda worthwhile,
on the 8th, we have the senior tax relief committee coming, but nothing else right
That's
at
it.
the moment, so
Yeah.
it might be,
We might be able to
Good
do
amount of
something
time
on the
to-
8th.
and neither is before the next select board meeting on the subject, so, yeah.
Yeah, okay? Okay, have a night off.
Save our ammo.
Save our ammo for specific targets. Absolutely. Okay,
Did the Economic Development Committee have any conversations in the past about dual tax rates? Anything like recorded that I could go through an archive on? Not to put you on the spot.
No, I other than they don't like dual tax rates.
Yeah.
I don't think there's been
Surprise, surprise.
a big discussion.
Yeah.
I guess the one thing that, and if we don't get it from somewhere else, it won't be that hard to figure out. I'd be curious in terms of how our tax rate compares to other communities, whether it's split or not split. Does $18 per thousand in Westborough, how does that compare to?
John's got some great data on that.
And that's supposed to be at the next presentation. I
Yeah.
thought they
Yeah.
promised,
Yeah.
like dashboard communities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, right, yeah,
I mean,
Marlboro has the 40% thing, but last time I looked, their tax rate was about the same as ours. It didn't have,
Interesting.
any increase.
Yeah,
So it was, they're about similar, but that's
is
a
it
while
more
ago.
helpful to look at the average residential household tax bill rather than the tax rate?
No, this
Weston's
is
tax
for-
rate is very low
But this is for, this is.
because the property value is
Yeah,
very high.
But this is for the industrial people and the commercial buildings. So like, I wanna open my shop, I can get, in Westborough, I'm gonna pay this much in taxes per 1,000 of the value of my building, and they're gonna, that's what it is. Yeah, it doesn't help you with
I thought you were comparing
residential.
residential tax rate.
Yeah, because our average family value is much higher than potentially, so
And
the
lower
rate
than
could
some.
be lower,
Yeah.
but, but I think it does work for maybe commercial and industrial, as long
It
as
should in
we're
theory.
close enough that
Yeah, it should in theory.
those values should be similar.
I'm not sure that, based on my conversations, I think taxes are not that high up the list for commercial and industrial. I think location is probably a big draw.
With the building itself, the convenience.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we live in a very ideal spot in terms of moving equipment and goods around, access to all these major highways.
And look what Amazon did to that AstraZeneca
That's what I
building.
was just gonna say. I wonder
It's, that was a monstrosity, and they still tore most of it down.
But I was gonna say, what would it be like tax rate wise if for some reason Amazon had chosen, say Marlboro, and that Astra spot was still empty?
Would
I'm
be
gonna
the
ask,
whole-
I'm gonna ask John to see, he's
Yeah.
the guy to ask on that. Hey, how much are we getting out of Otis Street there now?
I think we were getting, when AstraZeneca was at 3 million.
Well, we were getting
Depends if it was
personal
before or
property
after.
tax because they
Just
were
the
an
gizmos,
LLC.
just the gizmos.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not that usual.
Yeah.
But I'm saying like, attracting Amazon, how much that brings to our levy? How much?
Well, it increases the value of the property, which now finally is probably just about happening because now they
Yeah.
finally moved in. But,
Exactly.
Yeah.
How much?
So I did have one question. I was on town's website, or maybe it's our website. The analysis of levy limit growth. Westborough's immunity to
yes.
Proposition 2.5.
But that's Ed Bain's paper
Ed
he
Bain's
wrote
paper, yeah.
probably 10 years ago.
No, he wrote an updated one for us 2 years ago.
Just 2 years ago, yeah.
Well, he
Yeah.
presented it, yeah.
He
Yeah.
presented it, yeah. That's an interesting one to read. And I think Ed used to be on the committee,
Yep.
used to chair it, and I think he made some really valid and interesting points that we should remember. And that's what continues, according to his paper,
Right,
that's a great contributor toward the excess levy capacity we
Right.
have.
right, right.
Which means we obviate Proposition 2.5 requirements. So, by the way, for those of you, speaking of Prop 2.5 and debt exclusion votes, they did bring up our letter. They chose not, the selectmen chose not to put it on their agenda. They did bring it up in the discussion of issues and correspondence at the end of, toward the end of the meeting. And it was just noted and no action was taken and they moved on. So, take from that what you will. Okay, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor? We are adjourned.